Kids Reversible Swimsuit, you will have 2 bottom pieces, and then you will have 2 sets of tops. So you'll have a front and back bodice and 4 sets of ties. For each bodice piece, you're gonna have 2 ties, and you want your ties to be facing in the opposite directions of each other. So we're gonna lay these right sides together at the shoulder seam, and it's gonna look kind of weird when you lay it on top, but don't worry, it'll be fine when you're sewing everything. I'm just gonna clip both of my straps to the shoulders of my bodice, and I'm gonna do this for both bodice pieces. So again, with your bodice laying print facing up, you're gonna lay both of your strap pieces right sides down, and just make sure that you're using the right straps and that one of the straps is facing one way and the other is facing the opposite direction, because these are gonna tie in the back. Once you have those all clipped, now we're gonna sew these at the shoulder seam for both bodices. We're just gonna start at one end, lay that under your presser foot, and then you're gonna sew or serge this shoulder strap on. Keep in mind too that swim fabric is slippery, so just make sure that your fabrics are lined up perfectly before you sew. Do this for both your front and your back bodice pieces, so you'll have all 4 straps sewn on to both of those. After you do that, go ahead and take one of your bodice pieces and lay it right sides facing up. Then take your other bodice and lay that right side facing down directly on top of the other bodice. Now what we're gonna do is we are gonna line up our shoulder seams, our neck, and our straps. I definitely recommend using pins for this because swimsuit fabric is so slippery. It can be tricky, especially when you go to sew around those tie pieces. Once you have that all pinned, this is what it should look like. We're gonna start right here, leaving an 1 to 3 inch gap. We're gonna sew around that strap, up to our neckline, back down our neckline, around the other strap, and then when we come to close at the end, you're gonna leave that same gap right here. Also gonna sew inside our armhole. So here we are, we're gonna start sewing right here at this end on our strap, and we're gonna remember to leave a gap here. So go ahead and lift up your presser foot and just start your sewing and your serging right after that little gap there. And then you're gonna go all the way around that strap. When you come up to your shoulder seam, make sure that one of your seams is pushed in one direction and the one underneath is pushed in the opposite direction. That way, both of those seams are laying right on top of each other and they're nice and flat. As you approach the end of your straps, if it's easier for you to just serge off and then put your strap back under, go ahead and do that. It can be easier than having to rotate that curve of the strap under your serger. As you come up to the end of your back bodice, remember that you're gonna leave that same gap here. After you have that off, I go ahead and I clip my serger tails on the end of my strap so that I don't have any thread hanging off there. So now I'm gonna go ahead and sew where my armholes are. I'm gonna start at the very end, and then we're gonna serge all the way to the other side. And again, when you come up to those shoulder seams, just make sure that your seams are laying in the same direction as they were for your other side, one going one way and one going the other, so they lay nice and flat. After you do one side, go ahead and repeat this with the other side. After you finish that, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn this right side out. So I start with my straps down here. I just stick my fingers through, grab the end of my strap, and then I just flip this right side out. Once I have both of my straps flipped right side out, you're gonna go in through the bodice and then just pull those straps through your shoulder or your arm so that you get the entire bodice right side out. Once you have your bodice right side out, go ahead and lay it out flat like this. What you're gonna do is you're gonna grab this first bodice piece and fold that down. And then you're gonna line it up with the sides of your back bodice. And you're only gonna do this with this front piece right here. So the first two fabrics that are touching is what you're gonna pin. So you're not gonna grab the back pieces. Once you have that first side pinned, this is what it should look like. So then what you're gonna do is you're gonna flip this over and you're gonna do the same thing with your back bodice piece on those straps that are left. So fold that down and then you're gonna pin those sides with the other sides of the straps. After you have that all pinned, this is what it's gonna look like. You should only have 2 layers of fabric in each pin. So if you have more, go back and do this again. Now we're gonna go ahead and sew these sides closed. So go ahead and pick a side to start with, and we're gonna start at the top, place this under your presser foot, and then we're gonna serge down. Now you'll remember we left a gap in the bottom of our back tie pieces, and this is why. Because once you come to that bottom where you left that gap, you're gonna go ahead and taper off your serger. Don't continue on to your other side. We're gonna do that separate. Once you have that one complete, now we're gonna go ahead and do the other side. Once you have all of your sides sewn, now what you're gonna do is take your bodice and flip those straps down inside, because now what we're gonna do is sew across the entire bottom, but we're gonna leave a small opening because that's what we're gonna turn it right side out through. So make sure that those straps are tucked down in there pretty good so you don't catch them when you're sewing. And what you're gonna do is go ahead and line up all of your side seams and decide where you wanna leave your small hole when you turn it right side out. So most people typically leave it like in the middle or in the center. I like to do it around my strap area because I know that those straps closer to those side seams are gonna be hidden anyway, so that's just where I like to do mine. Go ahead and sew across the entire bottom of your bodice, and then go ahead and turn it right side out through the small hole that you left. Go ahead and sew across the entire bottom of your bodice, and once you're done with that, go ahead and turn it right side out through the small hole that you left. Once it's right side out, you have 2 options for closing the hole. You can either use a sewing machine and zigzag or straight stitch it closed, or you can do what's called an invisible ladder stitch. So with the ladder stitch, you will need to use a needle and thread. But I find that I actually prefer this way because it completely hides the threads and you won't be able to see them at all. So once you're finished closing your hole, this is what it will look like, and then you just tie these straps in the back. Here's where my ladder stitch was. As you can see, you can't see it. Bottoms, you're gonna lay both pieces right sides together, go ahead and pin, and then you're gonna sew inside the legs. You're gonna start at the very top of the bottoms and make sure that that's lined up really well. Because these are reversible, you want all of your fabric to match up perfectly. You sew both sides of your bottoms, you're gonna take these and now we're gonna turn them right side out. So I just stick my arm right through the middle, grab the other piece and pull it through. Once the bottoms are right sides out, go ahead and lay everything out flat like this. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold these in half. Like we did with our top, the fabrics that are touching first are gonna be what you pin and what you sew together. So I'm just gonna fold my top layer down to get it out of the way, and those 2 fabrics that are in the middle that are touching together first are gonna be what you pin together. And we're gonna do that for both sides. So go ahead and do this one side and now go to your other side and do the same thing. Pin those fabrics that are touching together first. Take note of which one of these is your back bottom piece. Now to pin my other sides, I'm just gonna pick this up and lay it out flat so that now I can go ahead and pin those other sides that I did not pin previously. So now what we're gonna do is we are gonna sew down both sides of these pieces. As you're sewing, make sure that all of your fabrics are lining up nicely, and then when you get to your seams, make sure that one is laying flat in one direction and the other is going in the opposite, so that your seams lay nice and flat on top of each other. After you have both sides done, I put a pin in the back on both of my pieces here so that I know where the back of my bottoms is. Then what you're going to do is open both of these up so that you can see the prints on both sides. We're going to grab this back piece here and we're going to bring it forward and matching it up with our other side, just like this. So you should have two pieces of fabric here. And in this back middle is where I'm going to leave a hole so that I can flip these right sides out. Have those two pieces pinned. This is what mine looks like here, and I'm going to leave a hole right there. So I'm going to start sewing behind that. And as you come up to your seams, you're going to need to line up those side seams, and you're just going to follow this fabric all the way around. As you are sewing and following those two fabrics all the way around, you're going to be pulling fabric from the inside of one of your leg holes. So it sounds complicated, but as you start sewing, you'll start to see. So right here is what I'm talking about. My fabrics are actually inside that leg hole right now. So as long as you just stay on track and you keep sewing these two pieces of fabric together, you will see where you're going to have to pull it from. So I'm just going to go ahead and put pins on both of my side seams where I know I'm going to have to sew those pieces together. So here we are, we're going to start sewing the back of our bottoms, and again I'm leaving a hole here, so I'm going to start right in here after my hole. As you approach your side seams, what you're going to do is go ahead and lay one direction and the other direction, and then you're just going to sew over that side seam, and now you're going to start pulling that fabric from the inside of that leg hole. So as you can see here, I am pulling that fabric from the inside, making sure that my fabrics are lining up together, and then as you sew, you're just going to pull more fabric through this hole. So we're just going to keep sewing along as we're pulling this fabric from that leg hole. And eventually you're going to come up to your other side seams that you had pinned. So we're just going to grab those, make sure your fabric is laying nice and straight together, and continue serging here. Now eventually you're going to come back around to where you started sewing, and remember that you need to leave a hole here, so we're going to stop right before we get to those pins so that we're leaving a hole to turn them right side out. After you're done sewing that, now what you're going to do is turn these bottoms right side out through that small hole that you left. Now that those are right side out, now what you have to do is close the hole. So you're just going to fold the fabric in about the same width as it would be if it was already sewn. Just like the top, you can either do this with a sewing machine or your invisible stitch. To do the invisible ladder stitch, so you will need a needle and thread. And what you're going to do is take your needle and thread and start on the inside of where your hole would be. So just stick your needle through here, so that way your knot is going to be inside and it won't be exposed on the outside of the fabric. You're going to pull that through, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle, and now you're going to go parallel to where that thread was that you just came from. So I'm going to grab my fabric and I am going to stick my needle in parallel to that fabric. Just a small amount, and then pull your needle through. And you're gonna repeat this process all the way across the hole that you left. So you're just gonna keep going parallel on the fabric across from where you came from. And then when you're finished and you pull that thread tight, it will completely hide all of the threads and close your hole. I tried to get a video of this, but it was really hard, so maybe I can make a separate video on this invisible ladder stitch. This is just the way that I prefer because I don't like any of my threads to be showing. After you finished closing the hole on your bottoms, you are all finished. Now you should have a 2-piece completely reversible swimsuit. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below and hit the like button. Thanks for watching.